We are part of Cyan, the CoHNA Youth Action Network. And tonight we want to talk to you a little bit about Hinduphobia on campus and in academia, especially with what we've seen recently with campus protests. It's been troubling for many of us to see Hinduphobia, Indians, Hindus dragged into conversations where especially we don't feel that, we need to be getting involved. People are just dragging us into these conversations where it's really troubling and upsetting to see the kind of natural, casual bigotry against Hindus on campus and in spaces where we normally feel that we're safe, but then to see people around us use these terms, it's really upsetting. So we're going to talk a little bit about what does Hinduphobia look like? Why are some of these examples considered Hinduphobia? Some people might not necessarily put those two and two together. So we're going to go through all of this. Just a quick comment about Cyan. Cyan is our youth action network. It primarily is built up of high schoolers, college students, and young professionals who want to get involved in Hindu advocacy, fighting Hinduphobia, and like I said, bringing our full Hindu selves to wherever we find ourselves. So these are just two of the roles here that we have at Cyan, but we have a national team that we're trying to fill out. We hope you'll join us. I'm joined today by Abhimanyu and Aryan. But before we get started, I want to show you some interesting things. Let's just get into it, right? Hinduphobia on campus. What does it look like? Some of you may have seen this video. This one's just a screenshot, but it's a video of a student at Columbia chanting about Azadi. I'm just going to go through these kind of quickly and show you a little bit about what we're facing and what Hinduphobia on campus looks like. This was a series of posts made by Loyola College, the Loyola College Socialist Group in Chicago, talking about Hindutva and Zionism and the occupation of Kashmir by the Indian state. This one was made by a student who essentially made the Nazi flag using the Om symbol, so desecrating Hindu symbols. This next one was by a group called Holy Against Hindutva, which again had a small event this year after massive pushback by CoHNA and Cyan, hijacking and lying about the origin of Hindu festivals or using it to advance a political agenda, using hateful imagery, using like academic terminology. They've also tried to describe Holi as a festival with a heart of literally burning of an indigenous woman, talking about the burning of the demoness Holika. All of these protests are related to Israel and Palestine, and some people seem to think that we should have some natural affinity one way or the other. I just wanted to put this image out here of a Palestinian Maulvi, calling Hindus filthy Hindus, cow worshipping Hindus, and saying that we need to be eradicated through jihad.
Please just raise your hands if you feel that this sounds like Hinduphobia to you. So 32 out of 42 people joining say that it looks like Hinduphobia to them.
I do want to go over the reasons why I think this is. Rishabji, if you could go to slide 19 real quick. I want to go over a baseline of what Hinduphobia is. People are confused about the term or they haven't heard the term used in certain ways. That's okay. Let's set a baseline and let's go over this definition. So a couple years ago, the Hindu community put on a conference called the Understanding Hinduphobia Conference. And they came to this definition, or they agreed upon this definition of what it means. Hinduphobia is a set of antagonistic, destructive, derogatory attitudes and behaviors towards Sanatana Dharma, or Hinduism, and Hindus that may manifest as prejudice, fear, or hatred. There's a longer definition there, and you can find that on our Understanding Hinduphobia page at kohna.org. But I just want to go over that basic thing. Some people say, well, Hinduphobia, no one's scared of Hindus. That is actually not true, but it also, the definition is a wide umbrella of attitudes, antagonistic and destructive attitudes. So it can be fear, it can be hate, it can be everything in between. But let's just start with that. Why are those images of Azadi and making connections between Hindutva and Zionism, the morphing of the Om symbol to be a Nazi symbol, why are these problematic? Why is this Hinduphobia? Well, all of the discussion about Hinduphobia and campus protest and Israel Palestine are based in some bigoted ideas about India, about Hinduism, but they kind of fall into three major categories. The first one is they make a charge of settler colonialism, that India colonized Kashmir. Two, they talk about the Aryan invasion theory, that some group of people from a very ancient group of people colonized India and spread Hinduism. Therefore, Hindus are the first colonizers. Therefore, it justifies some kind of oppression of modern day Hindus. And thirdly, that Hinduism is a Western construct, that the British invented what we call modern Hinduism. Therefore, criticism of it is not real criticism because it doesn't really exist, right? So we have those three: settler colonialism, Aryan invasion theory, and Hinduism as a Western construct. Let's take a look at the first one. So what do we mean by settler colonialism? So the claim that people at these protests make is that India has colonized Kashmir, which is a majority Muslim land, and they want to settle it with Hindus to change the demographics. This is Hinduphobia because it whitewashes violence against Hindus. The Kashmiri Hindu genocide of the 80s and 90s was real violence against Hindus who had been there and their roots had been there for thousands of years. Hindus cannot, by definition, be colonizers because they are the original inhabitants of Kashmir. Hindus are the ones who have been ethnically cleansed through 7 genocides over 800 years. By definition, they cannot be settler colonialists. But they make that claim because of our second point. Rishabhji, if you go to the next slide. So they justify that first point by saying that there is some debunked racist colonial theory called the Aryan invasion theory about an extremely ancient group of people who came from outside India, invaded, imposed Hinduism and the caste system on the people. This is Hinduphobia. Because for one, this theory has been thoroughly debunked. And let's be clear, it is a British theory, primarily came up with from colonial missionaries who had an embedded interest in trying to convert Hindus and justify the empire. And it denies the indigeneity of Hindus, meaning that they're trying to prove that Hindus are not indigenous to India. And they claim us as outsiders, that Kashmiri Hindus do not belong there, or any Hindu for that matter. Let's go to the next slide. And lastly, they try to say that because the Aryans invaded and because modern Hinduism is a British invention, that the Hindu identity did not exist historically. So if it didn't exist historically, then the Hindus cannot claim to have been indigenous. They can't claim to have been there 1,000 years ago because they were not Hindus, because the religion didn't exist. This is very obvious. It's a little bit weird. I know some of you may not have heard this point before. It might seem like, oh, that's no one's saying that. I can guarantee you, people claim these types of things. If you see here, The Caravan, which is quite a bigoted, racist magazine, tells you that in certain circles, these points are made constantly, right? It relies on these colonial narratives that denies Hindus the ability to tell the story about themselves. It denies our lived experience of Hindus. It denies us our indigenous voice, right? There are plenty of scriptures, literature, poetry that people can bring to say, hey, look, Hindu civilization is an old thing. The Hindu identity is real. It's existed for thousands of years. But if you only listen to one side and you say, oh, my sources say this, then obviously you're denying us our voice. We're saying, hey, listen to us. And you're saying, no, we're not going to do that. It also advances the idea of Hindus as savages without civilization, right? This was the British way of talking. And they're kind of uncritically accepting these points. So now that we have a baseline, right? Settler colonialism, the Aryan invasion theory, and Hinduism as a Western construct. These are kind of the very basic arguments that people at the campus protest will use to try and uh, prevent us from speaking ourselves, but also it's just kind of textbook Hinduphobia. So I am very far from the college experience, but we have two people here, Abhimanyu and Aryan, who are much closer in college or close to college. And I think they're a lot closer. And I really want us to give them the space and the voice to talk about what does it actually feel like on the ground, right? What are people saying? Are people saying these types of things? And what can we do about it? So I want to give Aryan the floor. If you could just do a quick little introduction, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll let you talk about your experience with Hinduphobia on campus.
Awesome. So my name is Aryan. I am a rising sophomore at UC Berkeley, and I'm super excited to talk to you guys today. And thank you for having me. Before I begin, I will say really quickly, everything that Ashwin said was spot on. Quite frankly, if you asked me whether or not Hinduphobia is real 5 months ago, I would have wavered a little bit. I would have not been so sure about that question, but due to recent events, which we'll discuss today at UC Berkeley, I think it's very, very real and very targeted. But just some brief background. I am a rising sophomore at Berkeley. I attended Chinmay Mission Balvihar for about 13 years and am somewhat active with Hindu organizations, Hindu Yuva, for example, to facilitate discussions on Hinduism. I'm also primarily interested, just as a student that's researching political science, studying political science and how these groups operate, as well as like understanding the challenges students on campuses, Hindu students more specifically, face in addressing these issues. And I think if there is anything you get from me today, it'll be the last point, which is advocating for passing our values to the youth, which I think is very, very often overlooked by not only the Hindu community as a whole, but students themselves and parents. Yeah, on to the next slide, please. So the two goals I want to set for today, at least as a parameter for hopefully things I want to achieve, are first, I want to describe this single example of Hinduphobia at Berkeley. And then I want to examine how Hindu students are organizing against such challenges on and off campus. So like I said earlier, if you asked me like 5 months ago whether or not Hinduphobia was real, I would have been unsure about that question. But unfortunately, a lot of these Hinduphobic events aren't simply constrained or restricted to non-Hindu events, such as Israel-Palestine protests. They also have, as you can see in front of you, events protesting actual Hindu speakers. So what you can see in front of you is an event that was hosted by Hindu Yuva on March 3rd. And it was simply inviting a Hindu speaker, Jay Deepak, to talk about Hinduism on Berkeley's campuses. And this is like pretty normal for Berkeley campus. Like, you have speakers on the left, you have speakers on the right, you have speakers of all different parts of the political aisle. And a campus like UC Berkeley that stresses and stands for free speech, you would assume allows for voices that are on various sides of the political spectrum. But as you'll find out very soon, he was protested and almost got kicked off. In fact, when I attempted to attend this event myself, I was denied from even entering by the Hindu Yuva group simply because they were protesting students outside and they were worried that the event would be disrupted. So it was at that extent of protesting. And if you just search up Jay Deepak Berkeley on YouTube, you'll see a lot of the slogans and chants that were heard at that event that you can see on YouTube. But I want to, instead of looking at that, I actually want to look at the background for how a lot of these groups operate, as well as some of the arguments they use, right? So you'll notice on this flyer that they sent out on Instagram a week before March 3rd, there are a few statements made, right? Keep Hindu fascists off of our campus. There is a map of India without Jammu and Kashmir, and there is Bharat that's crossed out and rewritten as India. And there's also the demonization of Deepak, the speaker, by adding devil horns. So quite quickly, you can see that this is less an argument about Hinduism or fascism for that point, but more so an argument for Hinduphobia, right? This isn't about political opinions on the left or the right of Hinduism. Regardless of your views, generally the use of delegitimization, such as stating that Jammu and Kashmir are not a part of India, Bharat is not called Bharat, but instead is called India, demonization by adding devil horns, all these things in the totality severely show the severity of the criticisms they're making. But even then, after I saw this initial slide, I was still reluctant to call it Hinduphobia, right? Because they're not against Hindus, they're just against fascism. There are obviously some tenets about Hinduism that you may not like or you may like. People have their opinions, fine, they're not Hinduphobic. That was my initial assumption. But if you look in the top right, I've linked a bit.ly link, and you can type it in, and it'll redirect to the official manual that those protesters released. And I'm just going to quickly read it out for you, at least the bottom part, which is Hinduphobia rests on the false notion that Hindus have faced systematic oppression throughout history and in present times. And the moment I read that on the manual, I was incredibly astounded, because they completely ignore several genocides Hindus have faced in Kashmir, in the Bengali genocide, for example, which killed 3 million Hindus. And this falsification that Hindus only face individual acts of discrimination, as you'll see on the next slide, such as Hinduphobia relies on flawed analogies with anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, though these are very different. The anti-Semitic ideology of Nazism led to the Holocaust. Islamophobic foreign policies over time resulted in the killing of Muslims across the world, including in South Asia, as well as a recent anti-Muslim ban of the Trump administration. And the last line states, anti-Hindu bias, on the other hand, cannot be easily linked to casualties on such horrific scales. And that's where I quickly realized that this was less about addressing parts of Hinduism they didn't like, and it was more about setting a double standard, setting a narrative, and being Hinduphobic. And I think that's why it's so critical that we set a definition for Hinduphobia, as well as engage students on campus. And I'll talk more about that on the next few slides. But before I do that, I do want to mention some of the groups that are organizing these events, because that's critical to understanding how these groups operate, as well as why they operate. So some of the groups that actually hosted this event were Cal MSA, so the Muslim Students Association, UC Berkeley Sikh Student Association, the ASUC, which just stands for the student body. So the student body, MEMSA. MEMSA is the Middle Eastern Muslim Sikh South Asian Student Association. So these are all like different groups, a part of UC Berkeley, including an ASUC or a student body senator that helped sponsor this group. And you can see that on the bottom left, where it says all these different groups that sponsored it. But rather than looking at the top two, which is the MSA and the Sikh Student Association, I want to point you to the bottom two, because I think those are a little bit more interesting. So the two student body groups that are mentioned are one South Asian group, as well as a senator. Now, they didn't specifically mention the senator in the document. In the bottom left, you'll see it's listed as Senator X, but I actually happen to know the senator personally, and they are actually Hindu. So you'll notice that a lot of these groups that say that they're South Asian or say that they're Hindu are protesting the very events that are proclaiming these Hinduphobic things. Now, I'm not saying these people aren't Hindu. I completely believe that they are Hindu, but they're being misled. And I believe I was one of those misled people too when I initially saw this post. My presumption of this post, the very moment I saw it, was, well, they're just talking about Hindu fascists, right? They don't like fascists, fine. But the truth is that it's much more deeper. And unfortunately, a lot of people that are Hindu tend to get swamped up into these issues and eventually start believing them themselves, not realizing that they're normalizing hatred against Hindus. In fact, espousing the very same things that people that are entirely against Hindus, entirely Hinduphobic, are advocating themselves. I kind of want to transition to the second point, which is I want to look at why there's so many Hindu students that are on the other side of the aisle, and why a lot of students such as myself would have even been on that aisle 5 months ago. So a couple of months ago, I was studying for an exam around 3 or 4 a.m. at night, because that's procrastinating. But I was in my student lounge, and at that moment, another few students entered around 4 or 5 a.m. And they just sat there and they started eating in front of me at 4 or 5 a.m. And it was a couple of them. And I was wondering why all these students were eating in the student lounge at 4 or 5 a.m. So I went up and I asked them, what are you doing up so late? And all of them told me that they were celebrating Ramadan, right? Because they eat during the nighttime and then they can't eat during the day. So the moment I saw that, I was first surprised, but after, I was actually very, I felt an immense sense of respect for them in a way, because they were valuing and practicing their religion. Whereas a lot of the Hindu students I've personally met, and quite frankly, including myself sometimes, don't necessarily practice Hinduism to the same extent at which other religious groups. Other religious groups do. This is just one example, being Muslims, but it's even Christians. A lot of Christians, for example, go to church every Sunday. I've never, unfortunately, seen any other Hindu students in my dorm or my entire building ever go to a temple. I've asked friends, actually, if they wanted to go to the temple with me, and they just said, no, I'm too busy, or maybe in the future. And so there is this strange sense of lack of identity amongst Hindus, whereas other groups are much more ingrained within their culture as well as their values. So I kind of wanted to look at that on a larger scale. And if you take a look at the UC Berkeley Office of Planning and Analysis of Surveys, they usually, or originally, used to record religious data. They no longer do. So if you click on the link below, it shouldn't work. If you go to an archival website or like the Wayback Machine, you should be able to access it. But amongst the students that they do on average survey, roughly 4.6% of them are Hindu in general at UC Berkeley. And you'll notice that's about 309 Hindus, and there are several other groups that outnumber Hindus, but some of the groups that are below Hindus are Muslims, Sikhs, and you'll see why that's important on the next slide, which is that if Hindus outnumber Muslims or other groups, on average, and I'm saying this not only for Muslims, but even Christian and Jewish groups, especially Jewish groups in the past few months, if Hindus outnumber on average a lot of these groups in terms of proportionality, why are they disproportionately less religious than other religious groups? If you go to Hindu Yuva, for example, awesome group, I'm friends with their president, really awesome group, nice people, but they only have 20 students. And that's like a genuine issue we face because it's UC Berkeley, we're in the Bay Area, and you would think that there'd be a lot of Indian students wanting to attend Hindu Yuva or at least a meeting or two. But unfortunately, it's not like that. If anything, and I think I spoke about this with another friend a few days ago, you'll always see students showing up to Diwali once a year, or you'll see them showing up to Holi once a year. But that's it. Their Hinduism stops there. And I do think there needs to be more religious advocacy involved amongst Hindus to keep us more connected, because majority of Hindu students unfortunately lose their roots. And compared to other religious groups such as Cal MSA, even a lot of the Christian groups, which while they may have some, an increased amount of people in comparison to us, on average, their groups tend to hold and host a larger amount of people per meeting on average. One last thing I'll say about this slide is that, the one event we had, which unfortunately got protested this year with Jay Sai Deepak, right? That event had 200 people. And I was really, really excited to attend that event. But unfortunately, a lot of the people that attend those events are adults. And so, and I'll talk more about this in the next few slides, but there is a very massive distinction in terms of religious observance or assimilation in terms of adults as well as children, and then comparing within children, international students, and students that were brought up here. All right, so this is just another few anecdotal examples. I did Chinmay Mission Balvihar for roughly 13 years, on and off here and there. But when I attended kindergarten, there were 30 plus students in kindergarten. And over time, if you know anything about Chinmay Mission, there's kindergarten through 12th grade. After you graduate, you join Yuva Kendra. And Yuva Kendra is the college version of UC Berkeley, which promotes Chinmay Mission. But over time, you'll notice at a lot of these religious groups in kindergarten and through 7th grade, you'll have 30 students. It decreases to 20 students. And by the time you reach 10th to 12th grade, they combine all the grades into one because there aren't enough students. And it's a total of 20 students. And so this is just another anecdotal example of how the lack of identity amongst Hindu students, especially at a place in the Bay Area, is really, really unfortunate. Especially if you look at the number of students that are attending other religious groups on campus at Berkeley. And I'm even inclined to say if it's as bad as it is at Berkeley, then I can't imagine how terrible it is at other schools. One more thing, international students versus ABCDs. This whole idea that I've seen a lot, and I'm sure many of you, if you are college students, may have seen a lot, which is that international students tend to be more religious and much more devoted to Hinduism rather than ABCDs. And as my father was an international student to the United States, I do wonder what the implications are for their children. I'd say that I'm somewhat educated on my values and culture, but what about my friend down the street who also has an Indian or a Hindu parent, but they're no longer as much affiliated with their values as their parents once were? And so I think as a political science student, also as a member of Cyan, I think that's something that we should be taking a look at in the next few years. Okay, so to quickly wrap things up, I'm at 14 minutes. I'll just say this. There aren't a lot of things, you may think that there aren't a lot of things that you can do in the status quo, but believe it or not, there are. So the biggest thing you can do right now is call your congressional representative. It only takes 2 to 5 minutes if you live in the US to sponsor HR 1131. It's a bill that effectively says that Hinduphobia is an active and it's a real thing. And as a result of that, the US Congress should condemn it. And initially, it may seem like it's not a lot, but when you realize that 5 months ago, I didn't even know that Hinduphobia was a thing, at that point, you have to realize that we need to set a baseline first. People aren't going to condemn Hinduphobia or advocate against it until they actually acknowledge that it's real and that it exists. And so, first and foremost, we need to support this bill. And if you can call your congressional representative, I highly recommend that you do. I've linked a link to more information to CoHNA's Twitter page where you can find more information about that. It's a bipartisan bill with support from both sides, so it's fairly uncontroversial, and I highly recommend that you take 5 minutes out of your day to do that. Very quickly at the end, I'll just say if you're a Hindu student, please join Cyan. We do foster awareness about issues impacting Hindu students. We amplify voices in addressing Hinduphobia. I would say there's no other group better than CoHNA right now and Hindu on campus that's actually doing anything to advocate against a lot of these things that are going on. It's not just about Israel-Palestine rallies where someone holds occupied Kashmir flag. It's more than that. It's more about actual protests that are taking place against Hindu speakers, a lot of double standards being held, and we need an organization that's connected to grow on college campuses, especially on campuses where there aren't these organizations already existing. So if you want to make real, long-lasting change, please, please, please join Cyan, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Aryan. That was incredible. Once again, I really like that point at the end. Cyan and CoHNA really are the best organizations to fight against Hinduphobia. We are an all-volunteer organization, people who are on the ground, who have real, lived experiences that have brought us to a point where we feel and we want to get involved and fight, not just, post messages on social media. We want to talk to our legislators. We want to talk to the DEI office. We want to talk to academic administrators. We want to talk to law enforcement. We are the people who are going to be the flag bearers wherever we find ourselves. It doesn't matter whether it's on campus or off campus. Your contributions, your financial donations, your time donations, everything is a step in the right direction for a country and a community where we can live with dignity and in peace. I now want to turn the speaker's chair over to Abhimanyu.
Namaste. My name's Abhimanyu Gupta, and I am a current, rising junior here at a high school in the Midwest. So I am the founder of my school's Hindu Student Council, which is the first Hindu Student Council in a high school in the Midwest, and founder of my school's Indian classical dance team. I also identify, I believe I am at least, an activist, and I take part in research on Indian and Hindu affairs and raise voices for these. And I would also say that I'm an athlete. I participate in multiple sports, including being an Indian classical dancer. But one thing that really ties me together with all of this is being a part of the Hindu community here, being part of our Hindu Mandir, and being our director of our youth program at the Mandir. So today what I want to cover is I want to make sure that we educate ourselves a bit more on Kashmir. And our driving question to that is going to be, why are Kashmiri Hindus so defensive over Kashmir? And additionally, I feel it is also appropriate for us to learn about the education curriculum being biased. What do schools teach about Hinduism? And finally, we are going to see Hinduphobic arguments on social media and learn how to deal with them, with our driving question being, how do people spread Hinduphobia? So firstly, let's start with Kashmir. I want you to imagine for a second that you are just simply walking down a street with your friends, 8:30 p.m. You are no more than 4 to 5 years old. All of a sudden, as the sun is setting, you see a brightening crowd out in the distance. This crowd has huge pitchforks. They have cries of Azadi. They have cries of Rallah Ghalib Yasulif. And they also are shouting to kill the Hindus. They're shouting for jihad. And you're just 4 to 5 years old. You don't know what's happening. You run into your home. But outside your window, you see that your friends, your neighbors are being murdered. This is the story of multiple Kashmiri Pandits. This is the story of Kashmiri Hindus. So, coming back to the very first thing that we went over was the shouts of Azadi. How is this important to Hinduphobia and genocide? Well, that is their call for freedom. There have been a total of 7 Hindu genocides and thousands of massacres. The first one taking place in 1389 to 1413 by Sultan Sikandar Shah, and going all the way up until 1752 by the Mughals in general. Then, up until 1819, Kashmiri Pandits were massacred and genocided by the Afghan Duranis. In 1931, they were massacred by the British officers simply because a British officer was arrested in Kashmir. So they gave an order to kill all the Kashmiri Hindus out there. In 1947 to 1980, this was done on border warfare and because of the British, partly, where millions of Hindus were being killed that were trying to escape Pakistan to come into India due to the partition. And then in 1990, as we know, the state-sponsored militia sent over and killed and displaced hundreds of thousands of Hindus. Now, moving on to education. I didn't actually know that Aryan was going to be putting that on his slide, but the Hindu-phobic protester manual, which was written by including a professor at Rutgers University, Dr. Audrey Chishke, says that Hinduphobia rests on the false notion that Hindus have faced systematic oppression throughout history and in present times. The reason that this is already false is, as you can see, we covered just one state of India, and we've already talked about 7 genocides and thousands of massacres. The fact that we are saying that this is a false notion, that we have faced systematic oppression, goes against data, goes against statistics, goes against basic history books. Another place where up on the very top, you can see this is a statement taken from a taken from a high schooler. And it's saying that these Hindu students have to go against the religious beliefs instilled in them by their parents and answer in their graded assignments that their religion is a human creation, and the religious works such as the Vedas, which they consider to have been divine revelations made to sages, were simply made up by human beings to exert their power. This is part of the reason we have that Hindu disconnect. And if we don't raise our voices about this, and if we don't talk about how this is wrong, this is rooted in these textbooks. Our children are reading this from a young age. When they read this, it is internalized within them that, oh, we are demon worshippers. Oh my goodness, we don't worship the true God. On the right-hand side, you can see that Hindu Plano residents in Plano are calling out the school district because they are inaccurately identifying the caste system as a core part of the religion. They are covering the Indo-Aryan migration theory, which we discussed earlier, was already debunked, and they are calling Hinduism as a cult. On the far left-hand side, going back to LUC socialists, you can see Kashmir and Palestine will be free one day. The reason that this statement already is troubling, and this is a statement that a lot of people don't see, but the flag of Azad Kashmir is an Islamic flag, which already removes all sense of Hindu identity from the land, and it further pushes the fact that Hindus do not truly have any place. If we can't even live in our own current land, in our ethnic land, where do we go to? If that is also being claimed as another religions, where do Hindus get to go to? This is what's being pushed in education. Now, what can we do about this? We can, as Aryan said, support the Hinduphobic bill. Additionally, reach out to your school districts. Read the curriculum of the schools you are sending your children to. Make sure you check your children's homework. When I was in 6th grade, this is a personal testimony, they taught me that Hinduism was a devil religion. My father reached out and we changed that curriculum. The AP Human Geography and AP World courses, according to College Board, the way they teach Hinduism is as a polytheistic, almost a pagan, they compare it to Greek mythology type religion. And in that, they dismantle so many things. They say that Hindus are oppressors. Hindus have killed relentlessly. And they say that oppression is within Hinduism. In AP World, especially, they teach that Mughals brought peace to India. Mughals allowed Indians to see what truth looked like, essentially. Social media-wise, the very first claim that I have seen all throughout, and I'm sure multiple other people have seen, is that Hindus have not faced any discrimination in Pakistan. Now, Pakistan was originally West and East Pakistan. East Pakistan then became Bangladesh, but West Pakistan was 14.6% Hindu at the time of partition in 1947. Today, it is just 2.1% Hindu. This is because of the amount of Hindu girls that are being raped every day, the amount of Hindus that are being killed every day. How do we fight this point? Pull out the facts. The second point is Hindus claiming to be marginalized are upper class privileged Hindus. Caste discrimination is illegal in India, and birth-based caste is a British invention. The reason you know this is because schools will teach you that the Manusmriti and other Hindu religious texts talk about birth-based caste. But if you dive a bit deeper into this, you can see the Sanskrit used to describe birth-based caste is completely different than the Sanskrit used in the rest of the scriptures. Additionally, there are monuments in cathedrals across England where they show these colonizers forcing the Rishimunis to rewrite their scriptures. And if that isn't more indicating of how our religion was essentially infiltrated in order to get this negative notion, and this negative notion is now what is being taught in the West to our own kids, then there's nothing more disturbing than that. The third point is that Hindus are not being hurt by their government. The reason I say that this is a major point is because temples are being destroyed left and right in Pakistan. Hindus are being massacred in Bangladesh. In 2022, ISIS terrorists attacked a Gurdwara in Afghanistan for allegedly blasphemous comments made by an Indian politician, which I will not name today. And they released a report saying that they essentially killed people inside a Hindu and Sikh polytheistic place of worship. They killed the kafirs in their own word. But Hindus are not being hurt by government, is what people are saying. The next one is Hinduism is Islamophobic. Now, the way you combat this argument is to say that the Gita states to love and respect everyone. But Hindus have been persecuted by millennia by Muslim leaders. And when Hindus retaliate, all of a sudden we're the bad people. When we try to go out and when we try to defend our homes, we're the bad people. When we try to ensure that our land is safe, when we try to ensure that our children are being taught properly, we're the bad people because we don't allow them to explore other religions. One of the best, most interesting posts on social media that you can find, which is extremely Hinduphobic, is that we are idol worshippers. For instance, a few weeks ago, I think, there was this guy who was at a Swami Muruga statue in Indonesia or Malaysia. And outside of it, he recorded a video of him chanting a verse from the Quran. And that verse was him. That verse was about how they smashed the idols of the idol worshippers. And they are essentially saying that Hindus are demons because we worship idols. This is being taught in school curriculum as well. There are multiple books, including sponsored by those in curriculum, that teach this. For instance, in AP literature class in the Blue Valley School District in Overland Park, they had a book on their AP literature reading list that said that Hindus worship Shiva's private areas, to say the least. This book was later banned by advocacy efforts by the different Hindu students there. But if this is what they're teaching in the small areas in Kansas, imagine what they're teaching in larger areas. Kansas, a state which who even knew if they even knew that Hindus and Indians even existed, are teaching that Hindus worship a Shiva lingam in a, well, we do, but a lingam is an under area of a Shiva, and we believe that it gives us power and energy. These are the books are having these seniors in high school read and write essays about it, comprehending their understanding of it. So the way that you combat these arguments is that you say that we do not worship the idol, but rather use it as a way to visualize an aspect of God. Do Christians not have photos of Jesus that they look up to and visualize for Jesus? Do Catholic churches not have photos of the Virgin Mother Mary, whom they visualize as the Holy Mother, as the as the Queen of the Earth? Do different religions not have photos of the figures they worship? Do they not keep photos of their saints up there as a way to pay their respects to it? We use our murtis as a way to visualize an aspect of the infinite. And the use of slurs is also extremely important. Ironically, a paper published by Rutgers, which is kind of funny, on Hinduphobia, which actually goes into Hinduphobic comments and images, which we'll see on the next few slides, says that the use of Hinduphobic slurs has been at an all-time high since 2021, and the majority of these accounts are far-right Islamic radicalists and Christian evangelicals that are posting about Hindus being trash eaters, they call us multiple slurs. But in retaliation, if we say anything to them, we get demonized again. This sets a double standard for our children, and our children who are addicted to social media, probably spending 16 to 18 hours a day on TikTok. Seeing this is infiltrating their brains. They're seeing that they are demon worshippers. Another big reason for the disconnect from the culture, and another reason why parents need to ensure that their children are getting equal education. Here are some of those memes I was talking about. Firstly, we can see one literally celebrating the 26/11 attacks at the Taj Hotel in Mumbai. We can see where they are suffocating Hindus. They're cutting off Hindus' heads. They're gassing them. On this right, you can see how they're trying to make this goal like Akhand Bharat into a Muslim kingdom. How they're demonizing Hindus, how they're saying that we poop on streets, how they're calling us a Brahmin-occupied government. Where's the Brahmin occupied? How does that play any sense into this? And then you are steering these thoughts that, oh, you are a victim of Brahmanism into our own children. What is even Brahmanism? Can someone produce an adequate definition of Brahmanism? Can these doctors who are out there posting these things on social media, such as Dr. Audrey Chuske or other doctors from these universities, define what Brahmanism is, or is it just a state of being a Brahmin? Good morning to everyone who survived the Fajit Purge. Okay, yippee-ki-yay! Thank you for getting rid of Indians. Do you want a cookie for getting rid of Indians? These are the type of comments Hindus are dealing with, and then they clearly don't know how to deal with it because these are what are affecting them. When they demonize Hindus by putting Dylan horns on them, oh my goodness, what an insult you have done to us. But when we do the same thing to you, all of a sudden, we are radicals. We have no sense of right to religion. On this one, we can see that they first shown the Hindu swastika as the Nazi Haken Cruz, because they think that it is fitting to compare the two, when in reality, the two have no correlation whatsoever. One is a symbol that represents racism. The other is a religious symbol. This should be the first thing that needs to be brought to the attention of school boards. If you want to make a change, the first thing you need to do is to make sure that your schools understand that the swastika isn't the same thing as the Haken Cruz, because in multiple Hindu cultures, we draw swastikas on our hands during Diwali. This is an incident coming from me. I had a swastika on my hand made out of mehendi. I went to school. You know the very first thing that happened to me that day? I went to the principal's office for promoting racist thoughts, for having a swastika drawn on my hand. This is the type of correlations they're showing us. At the bottom, we can see that when in minority, yes, we Hindus only poo in the loop. Where are Hindus actually like the minority and then safe? Besides in Western nations, where in the ethnic Indian subcontinent are Hindus safe as a minority? And then when in majority, the racist comments like these. But if we turn the tables around, all of a sudden they're going to take their pitchforks out, they're going to take their fires out, and start attacking us, burning down our houses. This concludes a basic thing of how you dismantle social media and school arguments. Because if you don't know the basics, if you don't know what your kids are being exposed towards, how can you help to end that? How are you able to take it to the next place? How are you able to defend Kashmir? How are you going to be able to educate your children properly? These should be the questions flowing in your head instead of, how do I make my child feel fit in his school? Because he won't feel fit in if you don't educate him. Everyone is educated on their school. Go to Instagram files of the children your kids follow. It says Romans 20:11. It shows all these Bible verses. Go to a single Hindu. It doesn't show anything. They don't have a Gita verse in their bio. How will they fit in if they don't have that same level of cultural knowledge that white people do, that Muslims do? How do you expect your children to fit in? How do you justify coming to this country if you don't teach your children your own values that you grew up knowing? That concludes my session for today. Dhanyavad.
Woo! My pranams to both of you. That was incredible. Thank you so much for sharing both of your incredibly impassioned voices. I can't think of any better place to start with Hinduphobia and campus protest and schools and religion and bringing it all together full circle. Thank you guys so much. I think what we're going to do is open it up for questions. I'm just trying to sift through some of our comments, but not questions. I see great presentation by Aryan and Abhimanyu. Keep up the good work. So that's a good one. I like that one. Great young speakers. Thanks for Cyan's effort. Hoping my kids will join your team. Yes, CoHNA.org, get involved. There's a great way to sign up. If you sign up there, we can definitely bring them into the team. Please, everybody, if you like what you see here, we're going to keep doing all these events. To keep in contact, go join the forum online. Go check out our campaigns. Join our email list, join our newsletter list. Come join us. Help us do the kind of work that will, ignite the passion in people and let them really speak their truth as Hindus in our brave new world where, Hinduphobia seems to be rampant for I don't know where it comes from, but people are hating on us, and we gotta put up our sword and shield. Great presentation. Keep up the great work. I see. Okay, what's the other question? Can Cyan do more outreach and try to educate more Hindus and get people aware? Yeah, we're trying. We're definitely trying. Once again, please join us. Help Cyan create college chapters on campus. We're in that process right now. How does CoHNA or Cyan have clubs on college campuses? We do have one on University of Buffalo. We will be expanding throughout the year. Obviously, school is not in session right now, but starting in the next year, if you or someone you know wants to start a chapter, definitely have them sign up on the website and have them come join us. We can give them all the resources they need to start that, right? They're going to have a huge national team behind them, and they're going to have us, kind of coordinating further. but they're going to have the might of CoHNA on their side. And I think that's a great way to start. It gives people the courage to start that journey with us. What are some of the current campaigns that CoHNA is doing that people can get involved with? Great question. We have a Hinduphobia team. We have a Swastika Awareness Coalition. Abhimanyu made a great point about the difference between the Nazi Hakenkreuz and the Hindu swastika. And you would think that this would be a very simple point that people would understand, but it just needs to be said over and over and over again. We have built over time a really beautiful coalition among religions: Hindu, Jewish, Christian, Native American, Buddhist, and have been able to put together a group that can speak in one voice that this symbol is our symbol, and the other one has nothing to do with us. It has nothing to do with, even in ways that you wouldn't imagine. I hope you'll join us for these kind of groups. We can always use more outreach. We have government outreach programs where we talk to legislators, talk to them about legislation that we would like to see. For example, last year, our president, Nikunj Trivedi, was involved in getting legislation in the New York City public school system to have Diwali as an official school holiday. These are the types of things that we would love to get people involved in. So I hope you'll join us.
There are two questions that I think are directed towards Aryan and I. The first one being, how do Hindu students in general react/feel about such protests by other groups? Aryan, I'll let you go first because this is more dominated on campuses.
Yeah, I'll just say that at least at Berkeley, a lot of the Indian students or Hindu students tend to be STEM-related students, so they're very apolitical. The few students that are political tend to be on more on one side than the other, the progressive side, progressive in quotes. There are a few Indian students, Hindu students like me that are fairly impartial, but unfortunately, what happens is that if you try to advocate for a lot of these issues, you get labeled. It depends on which side you're offending. Some people label you as a Republican or conservative. The other side label you as a leftist or progressive. So there's people need to understand that it's a bipartisan issue. Everyone should be agreeing on it, regardless of your political affiliation.
As for me, I think part of the issue comes from the Kashmir side, especially considering today there was a horrible attack on a bus carrying pilgrims coming from Rayasi, in the district Rayasi, and they were going to Vaishno Mata Mandir. And these children were killed in a bus, and that bus was sent trampling down a slope. And that slope, the bodies flung out of it, and they were shooting at the bodies. They were killing these innocent kids, tying their bodies up to trees. But then, essentially, no one of these protests are talking about that. For me, the protests feel one-sided. They've always been one-sided. I have never seen a protest about the hundreds of thousands of Pakistani Hindus being killed, the hundreds of thousands of Bangladeshi Hindus being killed. I've never seen a protest about the violence happening in Jammu Kashmir. I have never seen a protest about the violence occurring in Tibet. I have never seen a protest about the violence occurring in Sri Lanka and Nepal and Afghanistan. Why is it only when it comes to certain racial groups, certain minority groups, that we allow these protests to occur? If we have the right to protest, why can't protests be for all groups, since we were given that right by the US Constitution? The next question for us, Aryan, is what has your experience been trying to talk to your more ignorant Hindu friends about the truth of Hindu identity/Hinduphobia, and what are their thoughts on it? Do they show change/growth?
I'll second the fact that, again, they just label you names. But one more thing I will say is that there are a lot of double standards and ad hominem attacks involved. You're just talking about double standards earlier. One of the biggest double standards I faced was, for example, I was talking to one of my Muslim friends at Berkeley, and he attends Cal MSA, Cal Muslim Students Association. And he was talking about how terrible it was that, like, the speaker, Jay Deepak, was against LGBTQ students. And I was like, fine, I mean, you're allowed to have that opinion. But then I Googled it up. Cal MSA's speakers who they host themselves, and their own speakers are hosting sheikhs, for example. I can't remember off the top of my head, but if anyone wants a link, I can provide it. Sheikhs that are fervently against any form of gay marriage, transgenderism, etc. So there's a very clear double standard. Like Abhimanyu said, there's protests for one cause, but when it's Hindus, then they always protest.
For me, I think that the issue with that is that the Hindus that I talk to and my more ignorant Hindu friends say, you do you, don't drag me into this, I don't care enough. And I think the root cause to this is the way that these children are brought up. I believe that if you come here with that mindset that you want your children to fit in, and if you will do anything to erase the Indian culture aspect of them, then you are not providing them with the necessary roots and balances as a parent that should be grounding them in their culture and beliefs. You can't erase their sense of identity, their melanin, their DNA, and their skin color will prove that when they hear the Sanskrit chants, they'll feel automatically drawn to it. When they eat the vegetarian diets that are meant for our bodies nowadays, they'll feel it. You can't erase the Hindu genes that we have. You can't erase the Hindu in our brain that we have. Their thoughts are simply consumed by that of ignorance because they choose to look away. They've chosen to look away at the death of their own people in a double standard because they are ashamed of their own people. And they try everything to hide it, but at the end of the day, they can't hide their skin color, they can't hide their diet, they can't hide their genes, and they can't hide their brain.
I don't see any more questions in the
Yeah,
Q&A.
that's about it all.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So I want to finish this real quick by once again plugging CoHNA and Cyan. I see a lot of interest in the chat, people asking, how can we get involved? How can we get involved? The easiest thing we can do, we've made it real simple for everybody. Go to CoHNA.org and sign up, get involved. We have a lot of different volunteer opportunities, a lot of different projects and activities, whether it's talking to your legislator, fighting Hinduphobia, researching Hinduphobia, teaching about Hinduism. We have a lot of opportunities, and I hope you'll all join us. I'm going to close this out by doing a quick prayer. I hope you all join me in a moment. Om Shuklam Bharadaram Vishnum Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasannavadanam Dhyayet Sarva Vigno Pashantaye Harihi Om.